the failures and the excesses of Wall Street. We've got to institute pay-as-you-go principles and practices. You know, that seems like a novel concept in Washington, but here in the Lehigh Valley, it's just common sense. We've got to freeze government spending. Rob, there's a lot of people in the Lehigh Valley right now sitting around their kitchen table trying to figure out what they can and cannot afford. And I think it's time that Washington start having that same conversation.
One of my next questions. If you're to cut spending, and everybody's concerned about that, where do you cut? What specifically is cut?
That's a fantastic question, and I would say that the number one area that we cannot cut in is the whole Social Security and Medicare, because what we have is these people out there, they're not getting any COLA, they won't be getting a COLA, which is a raise in the Social Security in 2011, and I disagree with what the Congressman said. I think those people that are living on Social Security see that their money isn't going any farther, and that's something that we need to take a look at. And the whole thing is that, you know...
Well, you said we're not to cut. Where could we cut?
Sure. Where we need to cut is really the military expenditures. What we have, our foreign policy abroad costs well over $1 trillion, which is about a third of the entire federal budget. What we need to take a look at is cutting, you know, the 55,000 troops in Germany, the 10,000 troops in Italy, because when you go look at those countries, what are they doing? They're cutting their defense budgets. They're cutting their defense budgets because we're stationed over there protecting their borders. And we also need to look at a very expensive and costly war on terror. I mean, the whole thing is with the war on terror is that the true national security threat that we have to our nation, the true threat to our way of life, is the national debt. And that's what we need to address. We need to go after the terrorists that caused 9/11 with small military groups. What we're doing right now is not working. It's extremely costly. And when you go back in history and look at George Washington fighting against the British, what a lot of people don't realize today is George Washington lost just about every single battle. George Washington lost just about every single battle. But what's going on is... What they're doing is they're stretching out the supply chains, making us spend a whole lot of money. We're spending ourselves into oblivion. Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires for a reason, and we need to get our troops home.
You're largely a call for defense, bringing the troops home. Respond, if you would, please, about defense spending cuts and then particularly anywhere else. I
wanted to amplify a point that Jake brought up in regard to COLAs, the cost of living increases for senior citizens. There is not a senior citizen in the Lehigh Valley that is not going to say that their cost of living was increased this year. And I'll tell you why, one very specific reason why. And that is the Lehigh Valley energy tax that has been hoisted on our senior citizens. In fact, anyone that flips on a light bulb in the Lehigh Valley is being subjected to a 30% rate increase for their electricity. A rate increase that Congressman Dent supported deregulation of the electricity companies back when he was in Harrisburg. So every single Lehigh Valley senior has been subjected to a cost of living increase, and they won't get reflected in the COLA for the country. But we all know that they're making decisions about whether they can.
Let's get a reply from Mr. Dent.
The question was on how are you going to cut spending, and you just went off. No, the question was about spending.
My question was about spending.
The question was about spending.
Hang on. Let's come back to my question on spending in a second. After I've allowed Mr. Dent a quick rebuttal here to the charge that while as a state legislator you voted for deregulation, and that's what's raised our
charge. It's a fact.
Well, no, John. Again, let me tell you the facts here. John Callahan supports a $22 billion tax. I'm going to answer the question. Can I? $22 billion tax on oil and natural gas production in the United States. You support it. You criticized me. True. You sent out a press release condemning me for voting against the CLEAR Act. You will tax domestically produced oil and natural gas at $22 billion. Now, let us talk about...
Tie that, please, to the 30% increase in electric rates.
Yes. I voted for electric competition and choice. Mayor Callahan supports it. He says electric competition and choice saved Bethlehem ratepayers $300,000. Candidate Callahan, you sure did.
No, I did not.
Candidate Callahan,
it cost me 30% more. How could it save me?
You said it publicly. It's your State of the City address.
We were able to buy it. Mitigate your increase.
All right, hold on, please.
I didn't vote for an increase. I voted for competition.
The 30% increase. Please, okay, time out.
Has resulted in a 30% increase.
There has no doubt that there has been a 30% increase,
yes.
Right? We can agree on that. His point is deregulation overall is a good thing, correct?
If we had stayed under the old regulated system, your rates would be higher than they are today. That is a fact. Everybody understands that, John.
So those who are dealing as I am with higher electric bills, What you're saying, I'm just trying to cut to the chase, is that over time you'll end up having...
But how much your rate?
Excuse me. That over time they will end up having a better rate than they otherwise would have had there been no deregulation. Is that your point? Am I summarizing that well?
Without competition and choice, you would be paying higher rates today. You would be paying higher, absolutely. And there are very few people who disagree. The Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission says that.
All right, let's come back to my spending question, please.
I would like to... Before deregulation, our rates were 30% lower than what they are now.
Let's talk about...
That's a fact.
Hey, Rob, can I ask something? If we're going to talk about energy, why don't we talk about some national energy policy?
I would like to do that. But I don't think we ever finished the spending question, if you don't mind.
Mr. Callahan was asked a question on defense spending. If he actually reads his own literature, he's for a freeze in defense spending. But what we need to take a look at, and again, I'm for a large cut. Good.
Okay.
You read your own stuff. What we need to realize is our country spends more on military expenditures than the rest of the world combined. That's where we need to take a look at.
My question was about not just defense, but where can we cut spending?
Here's what, I've already talked about no more bailouts. I've already talked about pay as you go. Right? And the two other areas that I want to talk about is that we need to freeze spending, non-defense, non-entitlement spending. Right? There are folks every day in the Lehigh Valley right now with their incomes down, trying to figure out what they can and cannot afford. The federal government, we do it in Bethlehem. We've got to balance our budgets. It's about time that the federal government starts having that same conversation as well. And, necessity is the mother of invention, and I'm quite sure with less money, we'll figure out how to get by. And the fourth item of how to reduce debt to plan, how we're going to lower spending, is we're going to take a program that we borrowed from Air Products, continuous improvement. We take private sector principles and apply them to the public sector. We have used that program, continuous improvement, to reduce and to slash $10 million of wasteful government spending in the city of Bethlehem. If we can reduce $10 million of government spending in the city of Bethlehem, imagine what we can do with a similar program.
You're assuming that program that derives locally can be implemented can a single congressman implement that? That's what you'd like to do.
I've been trying to answer this question on how to cut
Charlie Dent on spending, please.
Look, you just heard John. He didn't give you any answers about how to cut spending. You heard absolutely nothing. He talked about PAYGO. The stimulus plan that he supported, more than $1 trillion when you had financing, that was not paid for. It was all borrowed. They waived PAYGO. They used this pay-as-you-go rule as a way to justify raising taxes permanently. Darn right, because you're trying to raise taxes through this PAYGO mechanism, and when you have big spending bills, you waive it. You waive it. Now, you also talk about some other interesting issues here on spending. I acknowledge I voted for the TARP, but you don't. But you also want to spend that money. You want to spend that money. He wanted to take TARP monies that were unobligated or
TARP
repaid.
Being the bank Wall Street bailout.
He wanted to take that money and spend it for a second stimulus. Also, we should take those TARP dollars that have been repaid or have been unobligated and use that for deficit reduction. Take stimulus dollars that are unspent, cancel them. We should also, for every 2 employees who leave federal civilian service, replace them with 1. We should return to the pre-stimulus spending levels for non-security purposes, with some exceptions for veterans' health and some other things. But nevertheless, we're going to return to that level. That will save us lots of money. I'm talking about hundreds of billions of dollars worth of savings. You have heard nothing specific from John.
We're going to place
your specifics were freeze on non-defense, non-entitlement spending.
And taking a program, because the difference between...
Is a freeze the same as a cut? Is there a place to actually reduce spending?
No, it's not. And we have to remember that Congressman Dent, Mr. Dent, he's the one who's nearly doubled the size of our federal debt during the 6 years that he's been in office. I am the only candidate here that has pledged to balance the budget. Period.
I'm the only candidate here that's reduced debt.
And guess what? All the people out there, if you go out and ask them, they would say, as you all are saying, that in our cities and in our homes especially, we have to have a balanced budget. Well, and they want to know, is that ever, just a second,
6 years,
they want to know, is that ever a possibility at the federal level, or are we just whistling in the wind here? Is balancing the federal budget, in other words. One of the congressional candidates who was on a debate like this a couple of nights ago was making that a main plank of his, and that is a balanced budget amendment.
Of course we can balance our budgets, Rob. It was not long ago.
Get there,
in the last year in office of President Clinton, we were running $250 billion surpluses in this country. It's not written in stone that we have to run the federal government with deficit spending.
Would any of you support a balanced budget amendment?
Yes.
I support a balanced budget amendment. I also support a line item veto.
One.
I'm a co-sponsor of it. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill to provide.
No, you haven't.
Have you sponsored a?
I'm a co-sponsor of a bill for
I'll tell you what
budget
Mr. Dent has sponsored. In his 6-year term, he's sponsored about one bill every 2 months. The only bills that he's had enacted have been to change the names of post offices. You can go to Thomas and take a look at it. 2 bills changing the name of 2 post offices.
You're forgetting a lot of amendments that I have offered the bills. And by the way, this Congress, this is one of the problems with Congress right now, actually. Jake has raised an interesting point. You know, they don't
talk about Congress.
That's right.
Let Charlie Dent make his point.
Look, if we have to allow for votes on major issues, Speaker Pelosi, who supports him, will not allow votes on major pieces of legislation. I wanted to offer an amendment to the health care bill to strike the medical device tax. I took it into the Rules Committee, and a guy named Alcee Hastings from Florida, who's an impeached federal judge, rewarded with a seat in Congress, said, you know, we make up the rules here as we go along. We don't want to deal with your amendment. You know why? Because he knew it would pass. Same with my medical liability amendments. So I offer substantial amendments, and the Speaker Pelosi-led Congress will not allow us to vote on these. It's very undemocratic, very unfair. The voices of the American people are being shut out. And it's time that it stops, and we have to send a message. We need to fire the Speaker. I will vote against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. He won't tell you how he will vote for the Speaker. He said in the debate,
I will vote for her.
He doesn't know how he's going to vote. Well, you have a choice. It's John Boehner or Nancy Pelosi.
And
That's
we know
it.
who you're going to vote for.
That's right. And I said it.
Well, he probably would vote for the Republican in this case.
Vote.
And you know what that vote means? Let's talk about what that vote means. It means a vote to privatize Social Security. It's a vote to take Social Security dollars and gamble them on Wall Street. John Boehner's in favor of that. It's a vote to take Medicare
and you find something at last is where I would like to go, and that is Social Security. A memo circulated as a talking point, evidently, among some House members and Democrats says Republicans promise once again to privatize and cut your Social Security, turning it over to the whims of Wall Street. So you agree with the gist of that memo? And Charlie Dent, is that true?
Whose memo is this? I'm sorry.
It is a unidentified House Democrats memo that was recently circulated as a talking point
what a shock.
for the campaign.
Well, and that fact check has looked into this. I oppose privatization of Social Security. I have never supported it, despite John's misrepresentations. Frankly, they're outright lies. But nevertheless, I've never supported it.
I guess you called a morning call liar.
I didn't call anybody a liar. John, you're the one who's been dishonest.
That's what makes a forum like this kind of difficult, and why we start talking all over each other. He says, yes, that's an effort by the GOP to privatize, and you say it's not. So what do you mean? Take a shot at that, Charlie. What do you mean that you would like to see done with Social Security, and how is it different from privatizing it?
Well, first, what we're going to do, as I said, I oppose privatization of Social Security. What we want to do is make sure that Social Security is there for the next generation. Right now, those are over 55 are protected, but we're going to have a conversation in this country about how we make sure Social Security is going to be solvent. There is a deficit commission, entitlement commission that was established by the President. They're going to give us some recommendations in December. And they're going to look, and I suspect a lot of issues may be on the table, but we're going to have a discussion about this. Social Security needs to be fixed. Actually, Steny Hoyer, who came in town for John Callahan, he endorses. But you said, well, he supported.
When are you going to take some accountability for your votes that you supported as a member of Congress?
He supports raising the retirement age. He said that. Now you stand there proudly with him, and you try to make the charge against me over John Boehner. So you can't have it both ways, John. You just can't. So fundamentally,
I'd like to comment on the Social Security. Social Security is basically a Ponzi scheme. What Congress has been doing over the past few years is they just keep spending it. So if you're retired and living off of Social Security, your government has already spent the money. And what you're getting back, yeah, it's more dollars, but you're getting less purchasing power. And that's the whole problem. And the young people that are going out into the workforce right now, they realize what's going on. They realize that Social Security is not going to be around in 40 years. So what we need to do is we need to take a very solid look at phasing out the program. And the way to do it is at the...
Just get rid of it.
No. What I'm saying is over the next 40 years to slowly, gradually move out. And the way you do that, and the only way that it's politically possible to do it, is to have a graduated phase out. So if you're age 50 and higher, you keep it at 100% because we need to keep those safety nets there, and you gradually move it down and down and down. And you make the program optional so that younger folks can get out, and if you do get out, then you lose the money that you put in. That's the solution.
Is that a good idea?
I have the article. It's March 17th, 2005 from the Morning Call, and it quotes Charlie Dent, and it says, Charlie Dent says that personal retirement accounts are not necessarily privatization. When we all know that everybody describes personal retirement accounts as privatization.
So you do not support personal retirement accounts?